There's a guy who shows up to interviews in a flight suit, who has performed concerts on top of moving vehicles, who built an entire public persona around a bowl cut, oversized clothes, and a level of self-aware absurdity that most musicians would never risk. And underneath every bit of that performance, underneath the costumes and the stunts and the deliberately uncool aesthetic, there is some of the most quietly devastating songwriting in contemporary pop music. Oliver Tree built a career on being the joke that you weren't sure was a joke. He started out releasing folktronica under his own name on a small Belgian label, years before anyone knew what he would eventually become. Then he reinvented himself entirely. The bowl cut, the exaggerated outfits, the deadpan interviews where you can never quite tell if he's being sincere or performing sincerity as a bit. He built an entire fictional universe around his music, alter egos, graphic novels, elaborate music videos with their own internal mythology. By any reasonable measure, it should have felt like a gimmick. It didn't, because underneath all of it, song by song, year by year, he let people see what was actually there. Someone who has talked openly about depression, about feeling fundamentally disconnected from the people around him, about the specific loneliness of being known by millions of people online while feeling unseen by almost everyone in his actual life. The character was elaborate. The feelings underneath it were not a performance at all. Today we're talking about 5 Oliver Tree songs that did something more than entertain. Songs that found their way into people's lives during genuinely hard moments. Moments of depression, of heartbreak, of feeling like an outsider in every room you walk into, and gave something back. Not because they were sad songs dressed up as pop songs, because they were honest songs, hidden inside a character built specifically so that honesty could slip past people's defenses. Let's talk about why that worked, and which songs did it best. Song number 1, Alien Boy. This is the song that introduced most people to who Oliver Tree actually was, not just as a sound, but as a perspective. The premise is, on its surface, ridiculous. A song sung from the point of view of an actual alien. A misfit with an eagle beak and ostrich feet. An outsider so literally and cartoonishly different from everyone around him that the metaphor barely needs explaining. But that's exactly the point. The absurdity of the alien costume is doing real work. It's giving cover to a feeling that almost everyone has had, and almost no one wants to say plainly, I do not feel like I belong here. I feel like I am watching human life from slightly outside it, never quite landing in a room the way everyone else seems to land in it. For listeners who have felt genuinely alienated by their families, by their schools, by a culture that rewarded a kind of normalcy they could never quite produce, Alien Boy did something that a more straightforward, serious song about isolation might not have been able to do. It made the feeling fun to sit inside. It let people laugh at the absurdity of feeling like a literal alien, while simultaneously feeling deeply understood by a song that took their alienation seriously enough to build an entire character around it. That's the trick of Oliver Tree's best work, and Alien Boy is where it started. The unreliable narrator, the proud misfit who insists he's fine while every detail of the song suggests otherwise. The character became a vessel that listeners could pour their own outsider feelings into. You didn't have to say, I feel alienated. You could just say, I'm an alien boy too, and the song did the rest. There's something genuinely useful, psychologically, about a song that lets you approach a painful feeling sideways instead of head-on. Direct confrontation with feelings of not belonging can be overwhelming. It asks you to sit with the full weight of the isolation all at once. A character, a costume, a bit of absurdist distance gives you room to circle the feeling, laugh at parts of it, and still come away having actually processed something real. For a lot of fans, especially younger ones still figuring out where they fit, Alien Boy became something like a secret handshake, a way of saying, me too, without ever having to say it plainly. Song number 2, When I'm Down. This is, in a lot of ways, the song that started it all. The breakout collaboration that introduced the world to Oliver Tree's specific blend of emo, emotional honesty, and electronic pop production. And unlike Alien Boy, this one doesn't hide its intention behind metaphor. It is At its core, a song about needing someone to show up for you when things are genuinely bad, and about the particular ache of wondering whether anyone actually will. The song went viral not because of a clever hook or a memeable moment, but because it articulated something simple and devastating: the fear of being alone in your worst moments. That fear is one of the most universal human experiences and one of the least talked about, because admitting you're afraid no one will be there for you when you're down requires admitting that you're sometimes down in the first place. Listeners who found this song during depressive episodes, during the specific isolation of a bad mental health stretch, have described it as one of the first times a song made them feel like someone else understood the texture of that particular fear, not sadness in the abstract, but the very specific dread of needing support and not knowing if it will come. The compassion at the center of the song, the offer embedded in it that someone could be that person for you, gave a lot of listeners something to hold on to on nights when they needed exactly that. It's worth remembering how this song arrived in the culture. This was 2016, in a music landscape that still treated emotional vulnerability in pop and dance music as something to be smuggled in rather than stated outright. When I'm Down didn't smuggle anything. It said the quiet part out loud, set against production that was warm and accessible rather than bleak. And that combination, direct emotional honesty paired with a sound you could actually put on and feel comforted by, not just devastated by, is part of why it traveled as far as it did. People didn't just relate to it. They put it on repeat during the exact moments it was written to be there for. Song number 3, Hurt. If Alien Boy hid its honesty behind a costume, Hurt mostly takes the costume off. This is one of the more grunge-leaning tracks in Oliver Tree's catalog, and it carries a directness that stands out against the absurdist persona built around it. At its emotional center is something a lot of people find difficult to say to the people they've actually hurt: a real, unguarded apology. What makes Hurt resonate isn't just the apology itself. It's the specific vulnerability of an artist whose entire public identity is built on confidence, bravado, and comedic detachment, choosing to step out of that armor and admit fault. For listeners going through the aftermath of their own difficult relationships, the ones where they know they cause pain and don't have an easy way to say, so Hurt became something like permission. Permission to feel genuinely sorry without it being a performance. Permission to be the person who caused damage and still deserves to reckon with that honestly rather than defensively. There's a particular kind of relief that comes from hearing someone else say the thing you've been unable to say. Hurt gave that relief to a lot of people who needed to hear an apology, sometimes their own, said back to them through someone else's voice. It's also worth noting where this song sits in Oliver Tree's broader catalog. Hurt came from Ugly is Beautiful, the album where the contrast between the comedic persona and the emotional content became sharpest. Fans who had come to the project for the absurdist videos and the larger-than-life character found, on this track in particular, an artist willing to let the mask slip just enough to be genuinely moving. That contrast, bit one minute, bare honesty the next, turned out to be one of the more effective things about his music. The humor never undercut the sincerity. If anything, it made the sincerity land harder when it finally arrived. Song number 4, Fairweather Friends. This one speaks to something almost everyone has lived through and almost no one likes to admit out loud. The experience of realizing that people you trusted, people you thought were genuinely in your corner, were only ever around for the easy parts. The fair weather, the version of friendship that disappears the moment things get difficult, the moment you actually need something from the people who claim to care about you. Fairweather Friends gives voice to the particular grief of that realization. Not the dramatic betrayal of a single moment, but the slow, accumulating disappointment of watching people quietly step back when you needed them to step forward. For listeners who have lived through this, and most people have, at some point, the song offered something that's harder to find than you'd expect. Validation that the disappointment is real, that it's allowed to hurt, and that recognizing a fair-weather friend for what they are isn't bitterness. It's clarity. The song doesn't ask listeners to pretend the hurt away. It sits inside the hurt, names it specifically, and in doing so makes it easier for people who are quietly grieving a friendship that turned out to be conditional to feel less alone in that particular under-discussed kind of loss. This track came from Alone in a Crowd, an album whose entire framing, the title itself, is about the specific modern experience of being surrounded by people, by followers, by acquaintances, and still feeling fundamentally unaccompanied. Fairweather Friends is one of the clearest expressions of that theme on the record. It's not a song about being abandoned in some dramatic, cinematic way. It's about the much quieter and much more common experience of watching people fade out of your life exactly when you needed them to stay, and learning to trust your own read of that disappointment instead of talking yourself out of it. Song number 5, Superhero. This is the newest entry on this list, and it represents something like the culmination of everything Oliver Tree's career has been building toward. After years of constructing characters, the alien, the misfit, the deliberately uncool everyman, Superhero takes the theme that's been underneath all of them and says it directly. That being different, being the person who doesn't fit the room, being the one who feels overlooked or overshadowed, isn't a flaw to hide. It's the thing that makes you who you are, and it can become your actual strength if you let it. The song was written as an anthem for what Oliver Tree has called the misfits, the outcasts, the people who've spent their lives feeling like the black sheep in every group they've been part of. And the message at its center is a genuine reframe. The qualities that make you feel unseen in a crowded room are not a deficiency. They're a kind of power if you're willing to stop apologizing for them. For an artist who spent years building elaborate alter egos specifically to talk about feeling unseen, Superhero lands as something close to a culmination, less a costume than a direct statement. After all the aliens and outsiders and oddballs, this is Oliver Tree telling his audience, plainly, you don't have to keep hiding the thing that makes you different. It's allowed to be the thing that saves you. The song debuted live at Red Rocks, one of the most iconic venues in American music, after nearly 2 years of Oliver Tree staying largely out of the public eye. That gap matters. An artist doesn't disappear from the spotlight for that long and then come back with an anthem about owning your differences by accident. Superhero reads like the product of real reflection. Time spent away from the noise of public performance, used to figure out what he actually wanted to say once he came back. What he chose to say, after all that silence, was the most direct version of the message his entire career had been building toward. So why does any of this matter? Why do songs from an artist who performs in a flight suit and films himself getting hit by cars end up genuinely helping people through depression, through heartbreak, through the specific loneliness of feeling like an outsider? Because the costume was never really hiding the honesty. It was protecting it. Oliver Tree has talked openly about his own struggles, about feeling disconnected, about mental health, about the strange isolation of being publicly visible while privately struggling. Building larger-than-life characters gave him a way to say true things without having to say them as himself, directly, unguarded, all the time. In that distance, the alien mask, the absurdist persona, turned out to be exactly what a lot of listeners needed too. A way to feel something real without having to feel it completely exposed. That's what these 5 songs share. Underneath the bowl cut and the bit and the deliberate weirdness, there's a body of work that took loneliness, depression, heartbreak, betrayal, and the experience of feeling fundamentally different seriously enough to write about honestly, and package that honesty in something fun enough, strange enough, and human enough that people who needed to hear it could let it in. It's also worth saying something about why this combination, comedy and genuine pain, absurdity and vulnerability, resonates so strongly with the audience that found it. A lot of people who struggle with their mental health described using humor as a coping mechanism long before they describe using it as entertainment. The deflecting joke, the self-deprecating bit, the way you can talk about something painful more easily if you wrap it in something funny first. That's not a performance trick invented for the stage. It's a survival strategy that a huge number of people already use in their actual lives. Oliver Tree didn't invent that pattern. He just built an entire career validating it, turning it into music and handing it back to an audience that recognized themselves in it immediately. Sometimes the songs that save you are the ones wearing the silliest costume. Because the costume isn't there to distract you from the truth. It's there to make the truth safe enough to hear. If this video meant something to you, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more honest conversations about the music and the artists that actually matter. See you in the next one.